There is a particular kind of courage that only comes with age. The courage to look back without flinching, to speak the names of people who hurt you without softening the truth, and to finally say out loud what you spent decades whispering only to yourself. At 85 years old, Ali MacGraw has found that courage. The woman who once embodied Hollywood's golden ideal of beauty and grace, the woman whose face launched 1,000 magazine covers and whose voice delivered one of cinema's most memorable lines, is no longer interested in protecting anyone's legacy, including her own. For years, the story of Ali MacGraw and Steve McQueen was told the way Hollywood preferred it. Two magnetic stars, irresistibly drawn together on a film set, burning so brightly that nothing could contain them. It was romantic. It was cinematic. It was, in many ways, a lie. The full truth is far more complicated, far more painful, and far more human than any silver screen version could ever capture. And now, after decades of reflection, sobriety, and hard-won peace in the quiet hills of Santa Fe, New Mexico, MacGraw is telling that truth with a clarity she could not have managed when she was still living inside the storm. To understand what Steve McQueen meant to Ali MacGraw, you first have to understand who she was before he ever entered her life. She was not born into privilege or ease. Growing up in Bedford Village, New York, her childhood home was defined less by warmth than by tension. Her father struggled with alcoholism, and the arguments that filled the household left a young Ali carrying wounds she would spend the better part of her adult life trying to understand. She was a sensitive child who learned early that love and pain often arrived together. She found her footing through discipline and ambition. A sharp eye for aesthetics led her into the world of fashion, where legendary editor Diana Vreeland recognized something worth cultivating in the young woman from New York. Modeling opened doors, and those doors eventually led her to Hollywood. Her film debut in the 1969 romantic comedy Goodbye, Columbus announced the arrival of a fresh, intelligent screen presence that the industry had not quite seen before. Critics noticed, producers noticed, and one producer in particular, Robert Evans, the powerful head of production at Paramount Pictures, noticed more than most. Evans cast her in Love Story, the 1970 film that would define an era. The movie, built on a simple and devastating premise, became one of the highest-grossing films of its time, earning over $100 million at the box office and turning Ali MacGraw into one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. She received an Academy Award nomination. She graced the covers of every major magazine. She had married Evans in 1969, and together they welcomed a son, Joshua, in 1971. From the outside, her life looked like the fulfillment of every dream a young woman from a difficult home could dare to imagine. But beneath the surface, something restless was stirring. Fame, it turned out, did not quiet the old insecurities. Success did not fill the spaces left by a turbulent childhood. And when opportunity arrived in the form of a new film and a new co-star, Ali MacGraw would discover that she was not nearly as protected from heartbreak as she had hoped. Steve McQueen was, by almost any measure, one of the most compelling figures Hollywood ever produced. Born into abandonment and raised in circumstances that would have broken many people entirely, he had clawed his way to the top of an industry that rewards toughness, charisma, and a certain rebellious disregard for convention. By the early 1970s, he was the highest-paid actor in the world. His films, from Bullet to The Great Escape, had turned him into a global icon. Men wanted to be him. Women were drawn to him with an almost helpless intensity. When Ali MacGraw arrived on the Texas set of The Getaway in 1972, she was still married to Robert Evans. McQueen was also married to actress Neil Adams, from whom he had recently separated. The film, a gritty action thriller directed by Sam Peckinpah, was already generating enormous anticipation. What no one could have fully anticipated was the speed and force with which the two leads would fall into each other's orbit. MacGraw has described the experience in terms that go beyond ordinary attraction. There was something almost elemental about McQueen's presence. She has said, he walked into a room and everything shifted. He had a quality that was impossible to manufacture and equally impossible to ignore. She knew, even before anything happened, that she was in dangerous territory. She had said as much to herself. She sensed, with the kind of intuition that women who grew up around volatile men often develop early, that this man had the power to undo her. And still, she could not stay away. Their affair began during filming and became one of the most talked-about romances in Hollywood history. By the end of 1972, MacGraw had filed for divorce from Robert Evans, the man who had given her the role that made her famous. The scandal reverberated through the industry. Evans, by most accounts, was blindsided. The betrayal cut deeply, not only personally but professionally. Yet the pull between MacGraw and McQueen proved stronger than any loyalty she had managed to maintain. In July 1973, they married. The wedding marked the beginning of what would become one of the most painful chapters of Ali MacGraw's life. Before the ceremony, McQueen presented her with a prenuptial agreement designed to ensure she would leave the marriage with nothing financially if it ever ended. She signed it. More devastating than any legal document, however, was the unspoken agreement that followed. McQueen made clear that he did not want a working wife. He was the biggest star in the world, and in his view, that was more than enough fame and ambition for one household. Ali MacGraw, at the absolute peak of her career, walked away from it. She has spoken about this decision many times in the decades since, and there is always a particular weight in the way she describes it. It was not, she insists, a simple act of submission. It was something more complicated and more heartbreaking than that. She loved him. She was afraid of losing him. And somewhere inside her, the old wounds from a childhood spent trying to hold a volatile household together made the sacrifice feel familiar, even natural. She cooked. She cleaned. She raised her son from her marriage to Evans. She folded herself into the shape that Steve McQueen required. For a while, she told herself it was enough. Their home in Malibu had its genuine pleasures. There were good days, peaceful stretches, moments of real tenderness. She has never pretended otherwise. But the darkness was always close beneath the surface. What Ali MacGraw has revealed about the reality of life with Steve McQueen is not a story of dramatic violence or tabloid sensationalism. It is something quieter and in many ways more insidious than that. It is the story of a woman slowly erased. McQueen's jealousy was relentless. If she spoke too long with another man at a gathering, he would bristle. If she expressed a desire to return to work, the temperature in the room would change. He controlled the social calendar, the finances, the rhythm of daily life. He determined when they were sociable and when they withdrew from the world entirely. MacGraw found herself walking on eggshells in her own home, carefully measuring her words and her expressions to avoid triggering his suspicion or his anger. The profound irony was that McQueen himself was far from faithful. Rumors of his affairs circulated widely throughout their marriage, and MacGraw has acknowledged that the whispers were painful and humiliating in ways she struggled to articulate. She had given up everything he asked of her, had bent her life around his needs and his demands, and still it was not enough to secure his faithfulness or his respect. His substance abuse added another layer of unpredictability to the household. McQueen drank heavily and used drugs, and his behavior under their influence could swing without warning. MacGraw, already isolated from her career and increasingly cut off from her own sense of self, began drinking more heavily herself. She has spoken with remarkable honesty about how alcohol became a way of managing the unmanageable, of dulling the loneliness and resentment that she was not yet brave enough to fully acknowledge. There were good days. She has always been careful to say. She does not want to reduce 5 years of a complex human relationship to a simple narrative of victimhood. But the weight of what she gave up, and the cost of living inside someone else's carefully controlled world, accumulated in ways that took her years to fully understand. By 1977, something in Ali MacGraw had quietly shifted. Perhaps it was the accumulation of years. Perhaps it was the dawning recognition that the woman she had been before Steve McQueen still existed somewhere inside her, buried but not entirely gone. Whatever the cause, she told her husband that she wanted to return to acting. McQueen's response was swift and devastating. According to those who knew him well, he told her simply that if she wanted to go back to work, then they would be filing for divorce. There was no negotiation, no discussion of compromise, just the cold arithmetic of control, presented as a final verdict. She took the role anyway. She accepted a part in Convoy, again directed by Sam Peckinpah, the same man who had first placed her on a set with McQueen years earlier. It was a smaller film, a lesser opportunity than anything she might have had if she had never stepped away from her career. But it was hers. It was a declaration that she still existed outside of his orbit. The divorce was finalized in 1978. The marriage that had cost her so much had lasted 5 years. 2 years later, in November 1980, Steve McQueen died at the age of 50 from pleural mesothelioma, a rare and aggressive cancer linked to asbestos exposure. He was gone before either of them had the chance to grow old, to soften, or to make peace with what had passed between them. MacGraw has said that grief for him was one of the most complicated emotions she has ever had to carry. She had loved him genuinely. She had also been diminished by him in ways she was only beginning to understand. Holding both of those truths at once required a kind of emotional maturity that took her many more years to develop. The years that followed McQueen's death were not immediately kind to Ollie MacGraw. She took on new work, including a prominent role in the television series Dynasty in 1984, but the momentum of her earlier career never fully returned. Hollywood is not a patient industry, and it does not wait for those who step away, regardless of the reasons. More critically, the drinking that had begun as a coping mechanism during her marriage had become a serious problem in its own right. She has spoken about this period with the same unflinching honesty she brings to everything else. By the early 1990s, she recognized that alcohol had become a cage she was building around herself one day at a time. She entered treatment at the Betty Ford Center and began the work of recovery, which she has described as nothing less than a complete reconstruction of the self. In 1991, she published her memoir, Moving Pictures, which laid bare the arc of her life with a candor that surprised even those who thought they knew her story. The book became a bestseller, connecting with readers who recognized in her experiences something universal about love, sacrifice, ambition, and survival. By 1994, she left Los Angeles entirely and made her home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The high desert, with its particular quality of light and silence, offered her something the entertainment industry never had: space, stillness, the room to figure out who she actually was when no one was asking her to be anything in particular. Today, Ollie MacGraw tends her garden, practices yoga, paints, and lives with a quietness she once could not have imagined sustaining. She has been sober for more than 3 decades. She has channeled her creative energy into meaningful work, partnering with artisan collectives that support women around the world. She has rebuilt friendships, including a warm reconnection with her love story co-star Ryan O'Neal, with whom she shared the stage again in 2016. She has never remarried. When she speaks of Steve McQueen now, there is neither bitterness nor false warmth. She describes him with the measured clarity of someone who has done genuine work to understand a complicated chapter rather than simply closing the book on it. She has said that she wishes they had both found sobriety while there was still time. That single sentence contains multitudes of grief and love and regret. It is the statement of a woman who understands that the person who hurt her was also a person who was hurting, and that neither truth cancels out the other. At 85, Ollie MacGraw has something she spent most of her life without: the freedom to tell her own story, in her own words, without asking anyone's permission. That, perhaps more than any film or any romance or any tragedy, is her greatest role, and she is playing it, finally, entirely on her own terms.